Welcome to the Fuban Forum. I'm Jake Barton of Local Projects, the principal and founder of an experienced design firm located in Lower Manhattan in New York City, but working all around the world. I'll share with you both our philosophy and approach to experience design, matching digital and physical design to make meaning in public spaces, and also why this idea particularly matters in a time of COVID, in imagining the future as we're all grappling with COVID. Our studio, if you come to it in Lower Manhattan, which you should, has a giant yes spaced on the front. And that's because the era of positivism that brings together both technology and architecture is the focus of our studio. It's really the fact that we're brought on board to create museums and public spaces that engage. Meaning instead of an architect that makes a building or product designer that makes an object, we create behaviors. We think about what can visitors do, which means that when we're thinking about projects, we might start, for example, with an interactive lamp for a new project that we're producing in Philadelphia in America. And you take this lamp and you're able to use it to both navigate, to discover, to reveal. At the core of our approach is taking technology and turning it into a metaphor. And in this case, what you're seeing is that as that lamp is being tracked, we're able to project parallax view of a historic painting and let visitors activate themselves within the space. So it stands in for discovery. Now, the client was so excited about this idea, we were then asked to partner with architects to create this huge urban sculpture. And when you walk into the lobby of the new museum, you can stand inside of the sculpture, look up and see the sky inside of that space. And that's a really good example of how we bring together all sorts of different disciplines, whether it's architecture, communications design, motion graphics, original software engineering, as well as storytelling. And all of those elements come together to make our work incredible. So for us, our goal for any museum project is to empower visitors with tools that engage them deeply with subject matter and form lasting memories of their experience. And the ability to give visitors a sense of agency in their learning and self-expression is what gives our work meaning. So today we'll share the strategic and creative thinking behind 7 different projects that show why museum experience design matters for institutions and especially for visitors, and again, especially right now, this time of COVID. This project is one of our signature projects that allows you to see the context of some of the original artworks, in this case, beautiful sculpture from Japan. And you can see the original location for that sculpture, you can manipulate it, you can understand the context around this artwork, understanding the story and the meaning behind it. You can also engage with it in an emotional way, which is what we like to think about when we think about technology. So as you're making different faces, it will bring forward different artworks from the collection that have that same face built into it, creating this huge collective experience around emotions. Furthermore, we looked at all sorts of different ways to engage with this encyclopedic collection, which we called Gallery 1. And within Gallery 1, it has a huge host of different ways to understand both technology and artworks all together, including this work, which shows all 4,000 artworks that are on display at the same time. So as you're investigating all these artworks, seeing the connections between them, whether it's based on color or line, the artist or the artwork itself, you can also download any of the artworks onto an iPad or onto a phone, creating your own walking tour of the museum. So we often, again, think about what can visitors do and create, and in this case, they're making their own way of understanding the museum. This is work that we created for the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum, which is our own national museum here in America. And in this case, we activate visitors to understand about design by inviting them to be the designer. Every visitor gets their own magical interactive pen, which they use to draw, to design, to create. So as you draw a line, it might search inside of the archives, revealing different objects from the collection. But you can also use this amazing pen to select and to save any object that you find both digitally or physically throughout the museum. So as you're making your way through the museum, If you find anything that interests you, anything that inspires you, you can grab this object, you can download it onto the pen, you can use it for inspiration for your own designs, as you design furniture, as you design architecture, as you design fashion for yourself. And again, suddenly the collection comes to life because it's about your own taste, your own curatorial ideas, and also about what you would like to create with those objects. What the New York Times called the beating heart of the museum is this space. It's a space where you can generate your own patterns, understanding color, and line, and repetition, making your own wallpapers as this communal experience of expression. This is our best case scenario because visitors are motivated to understand what design is and how wallpaper works, again investigating the collection, but doing so to release their own creativity. The museum has a very simple mission statement. 4 words. They want to inspire visitors through design. And this idea of inspiring, of empowering, comes to the forefront with this pen. This is likely the world's first bacon and eggs wallpaper ever created. But every day visitors are making their own expressions, are exploring their own ideas about design. And then, not surprisingly, because they've done so much of their own work, they then want to share it with people. They feel an ownership over it. And that, in turn, leads to this, which is visitors actively producing and promoting the experience all over the world through social media because they're taking ownership, they're empowered through design. So that's a lot of what we try to do, is to take the core mission of a museum and put it directly into action. We find this all the time on social media where people are basically, again, producing their own experiences and their own ideas and sharing it, which of course represents itself very, very well on the museum. Probably our biggest project in terms of reputation is the 9/11 Memorial Museum. And we took this idea of the museum as a platform, as a space for visitors to express themselves very seriously when we thought about the 9/11 Museum. And that's because, particularly in New York City, at the heart of where this tragedy occurred, so many people had their own 9/11 story, their own 9/11 experience. And so what we did was we pitched the museum on the idea that as visitors would enter the museum, they would hear from all the other people, all the different stories, all the firsthand experiences, and bring you back to what we call an entry narrative, to your own experience of 9/11, to understand what it was like for you and then for other people. And so as you make your way through, you'll hear from people all around the world telling their own 9/11 story, like this.
September 11th, 2001.
On September 11th.
On September 11th.
I was in Honolulu, Hawaii.
Cairo, Egypt.
des Champs-Élysées à Paris.
In college at UC
I was
Berkeley.
in Times Square in
São Paulo do Brasil.
Estaba en Miami, Florida.
Scottish Highlands.
We were actually in a meeting when someone barged in and said,
Oh my God, a plane has just crashed into the World Trade Center.
Kind of frantically get to a radio.
When I heard it over the radio.
And so first you hear people witnessing it from afar. Then you see people who saw it with their own eyes. And then as you make your way to the bottom of the ramp, you see it for yourself. A lot of the museum has an incredible wealth of artifacts, a huge quantity of stories to share all around what happened on that day and what people's experiences were. But some of the most powerful experiences are actually rooms that have literally nothing in it besides the human voice. You go into these spaces and you hear first-person experiences of what it was like on that day, and the intensity of that moment is really captured in each individual voice sharing their own individual experience. That, of course, is then shared throughout a range of projects at the end of the museum experience, this one using artificial intelligence to collect together different timelines from 9/11-2001 to today, looking through 4 million news articles of headlines. We similarly are able to tell stories of today through visitors' own feelings. So if when you first walk in, you hear others' 9/11 stories and then these single voices, here's where you get to share your own thoughts, your own feelings and reflections. What's amazing about this is the incredible poetry that comes forward from visitors. This I literally shot with my own phone. My father came home from work that day in a dusty suit. I thank God he came home at all. I miss you both every day. I love you, Dad and Chris. Love, John. Or even this, we were mere kids when this happened. Now as adults, we understand the impact of this tragic event. So you get the much larger sense of context around people's individual experiences, all of which comes together in an emotional core when you're able to leave your own feelings, your own experience, and your own histories about 9/11 there as a witness to the future. We have a lot of projects that deal with how we build community within museum spaces. This is a project in Denmark called ARoS Public. And ARoS is an amazing, but a very, very unusual institution because it's both a beautiful contemporary art museum with this Olafur Eliasson piece on the roof, but it's also a space that brings together all sorts of different people. So if you know the idea of a membership, the membership to the museum is larger than the number of people that live in the city of Aarhus. So think about that. More people belong to the museum than the entire city itself, which means it draws all these people from around the region because it focuses not just on the art, but almost more importantly on the visitor and on the visitor's experience. This is a project called ARoS Public, which is almost like a membership lounge on steroids. It brings in different elderly people, young people, students, artists, journalists in residence, different classes, different presentations. It's almost like a town square inside of the museum. And it's the brainchild of this incredible man. He doesn't present himself as the director of a major art museum, but he is, Erlen Højersten, who came to our studio and said, I want you to make a perfect museum. I want you to make a museum that's almost like a friend who can challenge you, who can make you laugh, but who can also listen to the inner ways that you think about art. I want to make a museum that makes you into a better person. We went about looking at different technologies, and we had 3 different ideas that I'll share with you. The first was to make visitors aware of themselves as an active participant, almost a creator, when they're looking at artworks. So imagine yourself, actually your gaze and how it moves on an artwork as a creative act. This uses military-grade eye detection software to reveal to you exactly how you look at an artwork. And in so doing, it shows you as an active participant in creating that artwork, in understanding and generating meaning for that artwork. What's incredible about this is the curators love it because visitors who generally spend about 5 seconds on an artwork, spend a full 5 minutes looking and meditating at one single artwork. So it's a way to capture your attention, to focus your consciousness on this singular artwork, and to make you then self-aware of how you look at things different than other people, what you may have missed, or what you may have found that other people have yet to discover. This is something that uses a clear LCD screen, allowing visitors to take the entire collection and make a portrait of their friend or their comrade as they make their way through the museum. It's a revolutionary idea that opens up the entire collection and invites you, the visitor, to express yourself through the collection. So these are just some of the beautiful portraits that visitors have made and been able to export. So again, you're able to promote and share aspects of the museum, even as they have emotional meaning for you in particular. This is the 3rd experience, which we call the art of conversation. And it poses crazy questions like this one. If you were flying this, where would you go? And invites you to have this amazing conversation, which is recorded, shared, and then projected next to the artwork itself. So again, it elevates the conversation, the insights, the social connections between different visitors. I, in fact, had the head of education confess to me. She said, you know, some days when I'm feeling blue, I'll sneak into the booth and I'll go into the folder and listen to people's stories about these artworks. And it will remind me of why I do what I do. If you think about it, so many art museums are training people to be quiet, to be subservient, yes, to be reflective, but not to be sharing, not to be social. And in this case, we do the opposite. We tell people, come here, engage, think, share, act, argue, and most of all, have a good time as you engage with this artwork. Planet Word is one of the 2 new projects I'm going to share with you. This is a museum of language, and it uses voice recognition to let us understand the incredible range of different languages that you'll experience it. So these are different onomatopoeia languages, and they get projected directly onto this incredible word sculpture that represents just under 1% of the English language. And so once you've heard the history of English, you go into this space that's all about world languages. So 50 different stories from all around the world. And as you learn to speak these different languages, this globe in the center can also be transformed into a rental space, meaning from this exhibition globe, we can pull it up using a simple robotic mechanism that then turns it into a chandelier, allowing them to clear out all of the floor space and go from here to something like this in about 30 minutes. And then lastly, this is the literal and the physical heart of the museum. It's this magical library filled with all these different books that we recommend to different families. And when you take any of those books and you drop them down, you can see, for example, with this Alice in Wonderland, the book literally spills out all around you. But you can see the book then transform into the White Rabbit. It transforms into Alice falling in. This is actually my favorite, where you can actually see when you drop down the book, birds literally fly outside of it. Trees can grow out of it. It's a way to understand the release and all of the magic that's inside of any book, and to literally make visitors fall in love with each individual narrative of books that are in front of them, making sure that they understand these incredible magical worlds that different words can bring forward for them. Fast forward another generation, Michael Bloomberg purchases the site and builds his European headquarters on the site of what's called the Pompeii of the North. So this case has 800 of the 10,000 artifacts that were found on the site, incredible small amulets, very, very large jugs, the first writing tablet ever found, the earliest writing tablet ever found in that location. And then as you make your way down from this contemporary space, you go to the mezzanine. And the mezzanine is really about these clues to the mystery of Mithras, about the context about Mithras, about what happened inside of this temple. And you hear from archaeologists telling their own story. And so as you're listening to archaeologists talking about the context of what it was like to worship inside of the temple, and you're listening to some of the original rituals, you're learning about what the archaeology and the architecture was like, you then are prepared to make your way into a space where we've figured out how to make a three-dimensional hologram that recreates the entire Mithraeum all around you. So you can hear the range of different rituals, of different chants that the original worshipers would have had inside of the temple. You can hear the different words and the different music that the different events would have hosted inside of the space. And as you stand inside the middle, literally the walls of light build all around you, revealing this ancient piece of architecture and bringing it to life, surrounding you and all of your parties together. You have a few minutes to then witness the archaeology for yourself before making your way back up to the top of today's London, almost like a time machine in reverse that's returning you back to today, having then visited and stood inside of this ancient temple based on the past. So with that, I'm going to jump into this question about the future, though. The question that we posed to all of these different cultural institutions all around the world is these public spaces that allow us to connect and create meaning together, and we're living in a time that puts that at risk. And so the question is, how can an organization rise to these challenges without losing their purpose? And we partnered with all of these different cultural organizations all around the world, from Singapore to Hong Kong to Australia to Europe to all across America. And we hosted these online workshops with people where people were able to share and to think about all of these different ways that we would ask them about their own hopes and dreams for the future based on COVID. And that might seem a little strange because, of course, so much of COVID is about coping, is about what you can't do, is about the detriment, the challenge that we have to these cultural spaces. And that really leads to this moment where you're just coping with how to reopen, how to function, how to bring people safely and responsibly into your museum or cultural space. However, as you're making these changes, The reality is some of these short-term solutions, certainly you'll want to discard once there's a vaccine or once we get back into a post-COVID world. On the other hand, there's a fair amount that you might want to hold on to. There are new solutions that might be revealed that you want to hold on to. And so that's really what we wanted to focus people on, is the future that we want and driving there through these COVID changes. Because as everybody knows, a good crisis shouldn't go to waste. You have suddenly all of this focus and attention to change things. The question is, what would you do with it? Now, of course, there's short-term solutions in terms of marketing, in terms of small robots, in terms of hospitality, in terms of different ways to open doors. These are things that you've likely seen passed along on the internet or that people are sending you. All of this makes perfect sense. We should attend to this. What we're focused on, again, are these long-term solutions that we might want to implement now to cope with COVID, but to turn into these permanent improvements in the long run. This is, again, looking at the subset of things you want from COVID and really focusing on the stuff that you want to hold on to years and decades into the future. So this graph here is showing how permanent we think a solution might be, like something fun like this, where you can project a perimeter around visitors, giving them a sense of personal space, right? That's a very good solution for right now. But the idea of making queues more spectacular, because you know that people are going to be lining up so much more, well, that's something that gets closer to a permanent improvement, right? That's something that we might want to have even in the future, even when COVID, God willing, is completely eradicated. And of course, you yourself in the very fun park, this example from 2016, have a lot of experience with these types of spectacles that you're able to generate. Pulsing visitors through space is another good way to think about personal safety and personal space. And so whether it's through signage or some type of manual system, making sure that you have a good allotment of visitors per locations could help. But this idea of a pre-visit anticipation, this is something that I know most museums, most symphonies, most cultural experiences really struggle with. How to build anticipation before you come, how to give context, how to make stories, how to create a sense of knowledge so that when you're on site, it has more meaning. This is something that you can really do now because of COVID. People are worried. They want to know what your safety system is like. They want to know if there's tickets. They want to know if they can come or not, right? In that case, you can start to generate a lot more understanding in terms of these experiences in advance. And we would really counsel our clients or any cultural organization to really think about leaning in to that pattern. How much more can you give people before they come on site? Similar in terms of COVID communications, a lot of people are thinking, yes, we need to put on our website how we're using hand sanitizer or what our filtration system is, all of which is important. But we think it's equally as important to communicate the civic value, the intense meaning for any city, for any culture, for any nation of what that institution represents. We think it's most important to communicate to people, yes, it is a risk for this museum or for this theater or for this opera to exist right now. It's almost a form of peril. And yet, we think it's incredibly important as a civic duty to gather people together in public space. And so communicating around the civic value for the arts, we think is almost more important than communicating just around COVID. Similar to that, if you could build out technologies that show heat maps of where visitors are located, it suddenly gives a much better sense of the density. That again has a safety aspect for today, but it could also be used to pace visitors and to make sure that everyone is comfortable as they're making their way through. Beyond touch interactions is a huge part of what we focus on. We were showing you a range of our different projects, from 9/11 to Cooper Hewitt to Planet Word, and a lot of it focuses on not having touch screens, but having your body, having your mind, having your presence be what's activating these different spaces. Again, we've been working on that for years and years, but we think it's really important for people to really understand that as museums move into the future, they shouldn't be spaces of clicking because of course you have that all the time on your phone or on your laptop. What if there were spaces that merely respond to your body or to your groups or to your emotions and allow you to create a much deeper experience with those museums? Again, I started mentioning this, but the idea of pre-planning your visit becomes incredibly important and suddenly very relevant. So many museums suffer because if you go to the Louvre, all you know is the Mona Lisa. So that's the only thing you want to see. And everyone crowds around this one artwork, ignoring all of these other masterpieces that surround you. Having a chance to pre-plan your visit, being invited to customize your visit in advance, is a surefire way to focus visitors on many of the hidden gems, on lots of the parts of your cultural organization that they haven't attended to or they don't normally think about. And again, because of COVID, you have a chance to rewrite the rules. One thing that we're seeing all over America, whether it is with sports, meaning baseball or football, whether it's with cultural organizations, whether it is with shopping spaces, they're rewriting the rules, quite literally, on how you interact with them. And museums should be doing the same thing. This is an idea that we're using for a project in Denver that we call mass cultural collaboration. So lots of museums do what's called focus groups. You can see here, they bring people together, they show them ideas, they get feedback, and people offer whether they like ideas or not. But what you're seeing on the right here is a web-based version of that approach. What that allows you to do is A, get data, which is far more scientific in terms of what people like and don't like, but also to have a mass collaboration. So thousands of people can look at the same storyboards and all give their opinion, and suddenly you have a huge data set in terms of what's most effective. You can essentially partner with your public way before building anything and make sure that that collaboration creates success for your museum in the future. And then lastly, the idea of a post-visit engagement. This is a project that we built in Amsterdam, a sustainable fashion center where you're shopping not just for amazing clothes, but also for ideas on how to live a more sustainable life. In this case, they send you all of the materials that you gathered on site in an email called Your Good Fashion Action Plan. And it shares all the different things that you would do to become a more sustainable consumer. And then we go out of our way to follow up with you afterwards. So a week and a month and a quarter afterwards, we're still reaching out to you to help inspire you to be a better sustainable advocate for fashion in the future. It's had a huge amount of impact. This is actually a year old now, but the amount of engagement, the amount of positive energy from these types of behavioral changes. And again, this is a full 2 weeks after visit. Almost 100% of people say that it changed their behavior, is what you can do with that level of follow-up, making that one visit into a much larger transaction that changes your whole life. With this, I'll say thank you so much for your time. Again, there's a huge range of different ideas here. We've done all of these different workshops pro bono for organizations all around the world. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to workshop with you and partner with you. We feel like helping to vision the future is something that we focus on as a studio, but particularly in this time of crisis, we want to invite anyone around the world who wants to partner with us to just think about your future. We would love to do workshops with you specifically to help you envision that future. So please reach out to us. We'd love to hear more from you soon enough. And with that, I'll say thank you very much.